Well, here we are at another special episode for the IFBTA, and it's in our Meet Our Member series. And it's special for a number of reasons. First of all, because PDI Technologies is special, but actually representing PDI is Matt Andrews, who is the Senior Vice President of Site Solutions and somebody that I've had many conversations with, but I don't think we've ever actually done one, on a webinar or a podcast.
No, we haven't. Good to see you, Rob. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
There you go. So, welcome to the IFBTI, and of course, PDI has participated with the IFBTA a number of years, and is a industry partner and a very important one. And you actually show up in a number of industries that we work in. And we first met you guys actually, I believe, on the retail side. And so I thought maybe we'd start with just giving us a background of who PDI Technologies is.
So thanks, Rob. If we think about PDI as a company, we are a private equity held technology company that is focused on delivering commerce engagements across multiple different verticals. We grew up and started in convenience and fuel, but have active engagements and practices outside of that now and adjacent markets when you start thinking about restaurants and retailers as well. Because the reality is the customer is pretty much the same. The digital demands are becoming the same. And we've got a complementary portfolio that started making investments in those other spaces.
Well, let me say, just some commentary on this because we do know each other and have a history. And it's interesting to me because most of the guests that we have on here, and actually for that matter, most of our supporter partners, really come from and have that background in the restaurant industry. You have a background in the restaurant industry.
That's right.
However, PDI has a big background, obviously, in the convenience retailing and the petroleum, as you said, which is one of those really big areas that we think that the two industries come together. So I'm going to guess that you are finding some rather unique things you didn't know about or things that are just in common that you really can help, PDI Technologies as they move forward further in the restaurant industry.
Yeah. So it's really what attracted me to PDI was looking at that crossover. I mean, the convenience store experience is starting to look more and more like a restaurant every day, especially since COVID. And when you start to look at really who are the business customers in that space, franchisees of large restaurant brands as well as large fuel brands, there's a lot of crossover between those two.
Well, they come together, they work together.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you think about the growing demands of us as a consumer when we walk into a restaurant or into a gas station, they're becoming really similar, right? How do we engage you off premises through mobile apps? How do we ensure that you're a known client or a known guest when you walk in? How do we ensure that experience is a good one to make you come back? All those are really, really similar across industries.
So what are the technologies that you're bringing to the industry, both on the C-store side, because restaurants are going into C-stores, but also that you're bringing, across that bridge over to the restaurant side?
Yeah. So PDI's larger portfolio includes back office, point of sale, loyalty, payment options that admittedly have grown up in the convenience and fuel space. When we start to look at
Which is rather complex, by the way. People think it sounds easy, but there's a lot of regulation in there. And when you combine it with a C-store and you think about retail, that's actually an interesting mix.
Yeah. I mean, really, when you think about controlled substances of alcohol and cigarettes and legislation around fuel, restaurants and food safety have a significant amount of focus with technology. Convenience and fuel is even more complex. Now, when you think about how do you start to carry those digital experiences across into the restaurant space? One of the places where PDI has had a very significant investment is really around the underpinnings of how you operationally ensure that all those applications and all those experiences actually work. So if you think about, no matter if you're in a restaurant or if you're going into a convenience store, it used to be as long as you could pump gas or as long as you could hand somebody their food, you could take cash, commerce would happen, and you can move on. And all the other niceties around digital apps or loyalty or ability to take credit card were nice to haves, but if they didn't work, commerce still continued. We're getting to a point with digital experiences in both of those spaces that if the technology doesn't work, commerce stops and the business has to close. And so, one of the largest investments that PDI has been making is ensuring that that the applications, no matter their applications that we provide or other third-party software providers provide, that they continue to work, that we protect the brands, and ensure that commerce happens. So,
Well, I'm going to guess that as you expand into new industry segments, you're going to have to be able to work with the mainstream technologies or applications that somebody has. But at the same time, some of those applications, I see this all the time when I go to a show like NACS, don't necessarily exist on that side. And so you have to bring it together. So are you finding that the applications and the technologies, the solutions that PDI is bringing to the table, do they seamlessly work in both industries, or how do you get that to forget about the integration,
yeah,
but how do you get it to work? So because I learned a long time ago, never tell a retailer that they're just like food service technology and the
absolutely.
back office, it's SKUs and it's not this and that, but they are similar. So how do you see that? How does that work?
Yeah. So I think there are two different sets of applications that I would look at, or two different answers. So when you think about the application that the guest that walks on premise interacts with, or the applications that are used to complete a transaction, like some of the fundamental underpinnings are similar, but they are unique enough that PDI doesn't believe, or I don't believe, that you're going to go and take a custom built application for one industry and immediately drop it into the other. Now, where there are overlapping similarities are when you start to think about how do you do inventory or build out tax tables. Like, so how do you build those applications? That there absolutely are economies of scale when you start to look at those components. Um,
But do you think the underpinning there is that experience across the board really actually makes you rather unique in bringing a solution to two industries that are coming together?
yes, absolutely. So the reality is when you want to baseline yourself in high availability, quickly changing guest demands, you need applications that are going to be dynamic and that have teams that are built in a way that are going to allow you to make those changes when guest demands are changing, right? So, yes.
So if we think about the guest, and by the way, we think about the touch points in convenience versus the touch points that are in the restaurant industry, we start to see those things coming together, how we connect, because all of a sudden we see pickup and delivery going into C-store, we see
Yeah.
drive-throughs, we see, but there are some differences, point of sale out at the pump, and doing digital advertising, those are things that are different. However, as they start doing like EV charging and people are spending 20 minutes,
Yeah.
now we have to bring those things together. So I'm going to guess that how you bring those things together, you're creating a new kind of experience for a customer who's been trained in one industry. A customer has a different experience in another, and yet you got to bring it together.
Well, and that's definitely proving out to be true when you start to look at talent that's moving around within the industry, right? And I don't just mean me and people at PDI, but when you start looking at who are being hired as technology and marketing leaders across restaurant brands, across convenience brands, like you're starting to see a crossover and looking for thought leadership and to be able to leverage the experience from one industry to the other.
Well,
So,
let me tell you, there are some operations I go to, uh, like Buc-ee's,
yeah,
in Texas, and you go to, I mean, you walk in there, you're not sure if you're in a restaurant, if you're in a retail store, if you're in a gas station. I mean, so really the lines are getting sort of blurred, out there. So when we start talking about the restaurant industry and we start talking about digital demands and cybersecurity risks,
yeah.
there are a lot of different points of connections in there, and it all seems to be evolving along with the customer expectations. So what are the specific challenges now that you're on this other side of the street, so to speak?
Yeah.
What are those challenges that you're seeing that you're now able to bring to the table and help to highlight and to solve?
Yeah. So I think one of the most important recognitions that we've had from using our experiences in convenience and fuel, and now looking at QSR hospitality spaces, is that if you are a restaurant brand of size, you already have a large deployment of technology that's been your tech stack has been built over a good number of years, and it is and you're using it to run your business, but it's so intertwined into those pieces of operations, you can't rip and replace everything all at the same time, right? And so
Well, you certainly couldn't do it in a situation where you have technologies that have to run other things.
absolutely. And so they're all interoperable. In fact, I had a good friend, CIO from the restaurant industry, who at one point compared uh, ERP and point of sale to heart surgery and brain surgery, that you would never go and do both at the same time. And therefore, there's this absolute requirement that any new technology that you introduce has to be able to interoperate with everything else that's in the estate. Just for the simple fact that if it's already a large enterprise, you're not going to be able to start from a clean slate. So this actually leads into what our strategy has been as we've started to look more deeply in the restaurant space, because we have deep expertise in connectivity, securing environments, doing brand protection, and watching for cyber threats that can kill a brand, that can steal consumer information, and the numerous different threats that are showing up from a security perspective. What we've
Do you
been,
think do you think that's because you have the experience to bring to the restaurant industry of people coming to a site and actually interacting in multiple interactions and multiple touch points in the same, visit, versus in a restaurant there could be virtually no interaction, or it's an interaction with a person who's in the middle, or it could be a technology, but it's not going to be multiple touch points in the same place in the same visit.
it doesn't have to be, but I think that our confidence and our expertise is really rooted in the fact that today we do over $1 trillion in transactions across our systems that we also help secure and provide networking connectivity for. And so there takes a special, it's a special sauce of recognizing how does someone who drives commerce operate? What are the important things to their business? And then even when you look at the fact you've got to work with a franchisor or a larger brand, but then also small mom and pops that may own one or two or three sites.
And by the way, that is a very important thing, because as we saw even in NRF this year, you're in New York City, you got the bodega,
Absolutely.
and you've got people don't realize how similar those two industries are between franchising, independents, mom and pops, small to mediums, and then the large enterprise. And they also don't realize that some of the petroleum companies, I think Shell Oil has like 36,000,
Yeah.
C stores, and that's going to make them as big as, any of the largest restaurant companies.
Well, and when you look at franchisees that you may think of as being someone that has an expertise in owning and operating restaurant concepts, the reality is that many of them also own C stores.
No, didn't know that,
Yeah. Well,
but I think
think about the
it
number.
makes sense.
Think about the number of C stores that you run across that have a one of the world's largest producers of hamburgers or other things like that built within it. So by it, it, they are very complementary in that regard. And so one business may be the primary, but they're going to have exposure into both.
Do you think that this is a little bit? I want to tap into your
Yeah,
experience in both industries. Having a foot in both camps. I know that, like, if we take a look at the non-traditional food service industry in the airports and colleges and universities, people have always dabbled with doing their own brands, or whether you bring the brand in and you license or you become a franchisee. But in the convenience industry, it appears that either they're going to go through the same type of choices, but there are some groups that have really decided that they are their own brand because they've been standalone for so long. So how do you see working in the industry there? Do you think it's going to be mainly brand driven, where they're franchisees or licensees, or do you think many are going to create their own?
I don't want to cop out and say yes to both. But here's, if I was having this debate with my team yesterday around some of the subtle differences between a franchisee in each of these two spaces.
Do you need me to have a non-disclosure with you? We'll just keep it between us.
No.
Oh, we're good. Okay, go ahead.
This is good because one of the subtleties and the differences was that a restaurant concept is very prescriptive of what the whole experience is. If you think about you down to the tables
Absolutely.
and the chairs that you buy, when you think about being a franchisee or a fuel wholesaler that may be branded by a logo that you're familiar with, like that, they only control part of the experience. So many of those, I think, are looking at if you can leverage part of the branding, say of a fuel, a whole,
That gets him into the station.
exactly. But then maybe you've got your own food concept that you run. I mean, we could think about Casey's, that's Midwest based. They're one of the U.S.'s largest producers of pizza, right? So they're definitely going to be competing with the other household name brands that you think of that are restaurant brands. But they've created their own branding. They've got a huge following based around it.
So I'm going to just tell you, since you brought up the pizza thing.
Sure.
So I've had some conversations, but I had a conversation with one of the vice presidents over at Papa John's, and we were talking about C-stores. And I was commenting that if you go to Nax, what you're going to get is pizza, hot dogs on a roller, beef jerky, 24-hour shots, and you're going to get chicken, fried
Yes,
chicken.
fried chicken.
And
Yeah.
that's what you're going for. But you know what? It's changing, because we're starting to see more and more the Subways and the full-service restaurants and some of fast casual, to where you're really doing freshly prepared foods, fresh foods that you could actually consume on site or take home and consume. And that's more like a restaurant.
Yeah.
And I think that that's to the proof that the industry is changing and bringing in. That's also to the proof that if you take somebody who's worked in an environment like PDI Technologies has,
Yeah.
you can move it over and create new opportunities for restaurateurs who may not be able to take, by the way, their current systems and take them over that side. You're actually a single solution.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have a significant focus on the United States, but we are an international company. And if you go and you think about your last travels globally, it is many people in international communities look at convenience stores as a place for fresh foods. If you think about some of the dining experiences you may have had if you're on freeways in Europe and in some of the parts of Asia
Sure.
Pacific, like those, that the demands for fresh food are clearly growing. And I think you're seeing a trend for that here in the US too.
So, you're spending your time out there, and you're really, I'm not sure that everybody knows, who PDI Technologies is in the food service restaurant industry, but you're certainly there and you have experience. Are you able to share with us, maybe a customer experience that you're working with in restaurants where you've been able to enhance a food and beverage brand, help them with their security and their digital operations?
Sure. So this sometimes becomes a tricky topic, because when you start thinking about who you secure, people don't necessarily want that necessarily advertised, right? But there's
I don't know about that. That would be like, I'm still stuck, by the way, on the brain surgery and heart surgery thing.
yeah,
But I think people want it advertised if you are doing Serve Safe and you've got certifications in how you're doing food handling.
sure.
So I think that over time, with all of the cyber threats out there, that people want to know that a place is secure.
No, so I think that's fair. So if we've got a good example, so let me talk about the service that we're providing, what I think we're focused on bringing into restaurants, and then we'll talk about the
Great.
example. We talked earlier about having a large proliferation of multiple different technology providers that are already in a restaurant, and that the growing challenge that restaurateurs have of ensuring that those applications are secure, and that they operate with, if not 5 nines, 4 nines worth of reliability, because those applications have to be running. Now, if you start thinking about the restaurant environment of being one of the most complex, potentially one of the dirtier environments for technology, when you start thinking about fryers, when you start thinking about electrical, when you start thinking about old buildings, like it's a real challenge to keep.
Maybe that's what they don't want to talk about, by the way.
No, I mean, this is again.
I get it. The reality.
But the reality is, it's a really complex environment with lots of fluids, lots of potential turnover of staff. That you need things to run simply, where you don't have a lot of expertise on staff in location. That you want the people who are working in your restaurant to be engaged with your guests, delivering a good experience, and making good food. They don't need to necessarily be technologists to ensure they know how things run. So our focus has been bringing everything from managed wireless offerings to 5G connectivity to the WAN, and then securing and monitoring those environments to make sure, one, that the brand stays protected. Not just the PII components, but anytime you see a brand and a name that goes up in lights as to someone was hacked. We've seen these things every day. Like these are becoming more and
Right.
more important and bigger threats. So we because of our expertise in other industries where we spent time, know how to provide an environment that is reliable and stable, and we work well with in multi-vendor scenarios where you don't have one vendor potentially pointing fingers at all the rest because they've got a vested interest in some other part of the technology stack. So we are agnostic with the software providers that we work with, but we provide that networking and digital experience to ensure that they are engaging their guests and their employees with the technology they've invested in. So, if we can now go look at
Go
it.
ahead. So now I want to know how give me a success story or give me an example of how you can take all that experience and bring that over in the restaurant
You
industry.
got it. So if we think so, KBB Inspired is a restaurateur, a franchisor, excuse me, a franchisee of multiple different brands. One of the challenges they had is that they had over 100 Arby's that has now quickly, because of all the investment that Inspire has been making in technology, has had a large amount of digital assets on their sites. They're based in the Southwest, many of them along borders and freeways in Mexico, not in Mexico, excuse me, near the Mexico border. And they've had inconsistent technology stability, and they had pretty poor visibility to what was actually happening in their digital environments. And so we worked with a technology solution provider and them as an end user to deploy across all of these sites our security monitoring and networking portfolio to be able to provide a stable environment, but also give them visibility to what's actually happening with the technology in their sites. So again, the managers and the employees of those sites can focus on their customer and the food, while those in corporate had the right visibility to understand, is the technology acting the way they need it to, so they can hold their other technology providers accountable.
And to get advance notice and know what's going on if
Sure.
something looks like it's failing. I mean, they certainly do that on the gas pump side and some of those pieces because you can't, as you pointed out, you can't be down in there. But I think you've also subtly brought in one other piece here that if you take a look at the environment, and I believe what you're talking about when you're on the border, is that some of those are not exactly the most accessible
Yeah.
places and they're remote, and that's always been a challenge as well. And certainly when you think about it, a lot of locations are actually the grocery store or the place that's out there in the smaller towns and remote places. And now you're bringing food service and restaurants in there, especially the independents, that are down there. And so you have that experience, but you also have the scope of the services, that wrap around that. And by the way, if we're going to talk about services, how do you wrap around services and how do you handle people, whether they're large, small, SMB, independent?
Sure.
There's a lot of different requirements out there.
Yeah. So you can look at services. I got the vernacular. I look at it in two ways. One, when I think about service being the service that we're delivering, the monitoring services we have, we have a platform that leverages you, and we are continuing to develop the AI around how we get good insights as to what's happening within client sites, but then also recognizing that when customers call, that they've got direct access to someone who has a dashboard that sees their
Right.
specific sites, right? So that's one part of the service. But when we think about how do we engage, as you said, different sizes of customers, we do this in a couple different ways. We recognize that the needs are different. If you are the franchisor, you're going to be highly focused on how do I ensure that I've got my brand is protected. How do I ensure that within reason, the franchisees all have a similar experience when the guests come in to a restaurant to eat. But then at the same point in time, they don't necessarily want to be the ones that are on the hook for managing, collecting technology requirements to each of the individual sites, billing individual sites, dealing
Well,
with
you're their
questions.
partner, right? You're their partner to help ensure that and deliver that piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, that's a shorter way of saying it, Rob. So we've got teams that engage the enterprise, but then we also then can take that down market. As like even the example I used, like we are not the provider on record for the logoed brand that they use, but we were able to work with someone of a different size to be able to fit within the technology requirements the franchisor was putting on them, but also meet their needs.
So there's a lot of information that you're collecting. You're collecting it on the network. You're collecting it down at the unit level, and everybody uses the word. I'm actually staying away from the AI conversation here, but
Right?
insights, the I in there, um, I think is an important thing. And so we just said the word partnership,
Yep.
and working closely with the clients. So how do you actually help them to manage and do their business better as a partner, as somebody who helps them to grow, develop,
Yeah.
expand?
Yeah. So being a provider and a related vertical that provides the applications that actually drive that end user experience. I think we've got the right heritage to know that as the plumbing provider or the security provider in this space, that there's a role we have to play that is an intermediary between the end user, as well as then the person who is providing the application that delivers that experience. So
And you may see it first,
yeah.
by the way.
Oh,
You're seeing a lot of different parts and pieces, right?
And I will acknowledge your comment earlier about the iffy conversation around AI. But one of the places where this is really important and it helps us is when we look at trending in security. So ignore the whether a network is up or down. That's a digital
Right.
discussion. That's the way. But when you start to look at where are threats coming from, there's so much media out there that we couldn't put enough people on staff to be able to be reading through and understanding what new phishing tactics are, what different threats that are coming in through, like what
Right.
ports are being exploited. Like we have tools that not only provide that information to our call centers and for
And
our own systems, but we actually have those tools that if you have a CISO on your own staff, we got the ability to filter through the news and provide them with the top 5 things that they should be thinking about as they
it's
start to work.
proactive.
It is, because I think one of the things that is different with a CISO than potentially other parts of technology is they have to be continually almost like reading the gossip column, right? Because those threats are changing so quickly. So figuring out where do they get the right source of news for their specific industry and for that their specific geography or profile, and we've got the ability to go through and build that for them, so that while we are securing them, we're also giving them other intelligence that they can be then using to make decisions in their business.
Well, I think that that's important because I'm still still working on the exact analogy here, but you are at the heart
Okay,
of
sure.
all the connections, so to speak, that are taking place. But hey, here you go. You're at the heart of the connections, but you got the brains to be able to go ahead and give them those insights and help them to manage, be more effective, and tie all the different pieces together in there.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that when we look at PDI and what are our differentiators, is there are other companies that provide similar services in the market. I think about the fact that we've operationally we scale up and down the market, and we understand commerce businesses that need to be open, if not 24/7, pretty darn close to it, right?
Well, we would say that that's a differentiation point.
Yeah, absolutely. As well as then having the tech stack required in order to provide those securing and connectivity services, but then also to be able to do it with that degree of knowledge of the industry, but do it from a relatively agnostic perspective and not um, we have found that if you are the provider of security and networking and then some of the technology stack from a software perspective, there's a proclivity to focus on just that component as opposed
Right.
to the other complementary pieces in the ecosystem that you might not necessarily need.
Well, you got to look at it holistically,
Yeah,
because if you only look at one component, that's what you're going to get, and you're going to miss something in there. And I would say maybe another differentiation point for you is the depth of knowledge of the team and the staff,
yeah,
in yourself
yeah.
included, who are working across multiple industry, and they bring that experience, to bear. Plus, then you filter on the international piece,
Yep.
you filter on the ability to work small all the way up in scale, because scale, especially in a franchise or license environment. So you really are able to work with all aspects of the restaurant food service industry, and help them to achieve opportunities by working with other industries as well that you also have those experiences in.
I'm not sure I could have said it better myself.
Well, look, I mean, I get this, and it makes a lot of sense. And not that all of our members and the listeners of this get out and see the different parts, but
Yeah,
if you get out and you see them, you start to realize what a big world it is, and but along with it, what the opportunities are for the restaurants coming in and going out, and you also start to realize that the consumer, and consumer facing, the security piece. And, these are things that just, you don't really want to, you can't be experts at all, but you want to work with somebody who is and who can tie it together. I like the part about being agnostic. I think that that's very important. And having your own solutions, but also working with the other solutions gives a customer the flexibility.
yeah. Yeah, I think that we try and anchor ourselves back to recognizing like who who's using our technology, whether it's the guest, be that a teenager to different stages of life that walk in and use the technology, or the restaurateur or the person who's running a convenience and fuel station, and what they should be good at and what they should be focused at. And the reality is the technology should just operate, right? I mean, you want one phone number to call, or ideally you don't have to call, and maybe in many instances PDI is proactive with our monitoring to be able to solve problems
Right.
show up on that end user site. But you want the people working in your restaurant to be focused on serving your guests, not sitting on
Absolutely.
hold or working with their technology partners.
So the debate you were having with your team
Yeah,
last night, and you were talking about this. There's always a debate of the new technologies and the trends. So we're still at the beginning of the year. I know it's March.
yeah.
Okay, so maybe we're a third into the year. But given what you're seeing, what are those trends that you think are going to be either the ones that are not top of mind that should be, or the ones perhaps that are top of mind but maybe they shouldn't be? What are the trends that you're seeing? Shaping our industry from your perspective.
So, um, and this is a trend that I think we've seen for the last couple of years, but the speed of change is it continuing to accelerate, which creates a couple things, right? I mean, one, yes, it creates new consumer demands and the way we want to meet our consumers, but it is extremely disruptive when you have a trend of trying to do more with less, right? As we look at what's been happening with the cost of food, with the cost of employees, like the uh, restaurant brands are being forced to get more out of the investment they spend in technology every day. But when you've got this acceleration of change, man, like this is becoming more and more IT executives are just sleeping fewer hours, right? And so figuring out, how you have a vendor strategy that uh, that helps give time back to your people, that is
And you
predictable.
need to be nimble
Yeah,
and you need to be flexible
yeah,
because you actually don't know where food service is going to end up
yeah,
being served.
yeah.
And I think that that's a big
Yeah.
difference because we don't, and it's changing every day with new opportunities.
So when you also then think about, so ignore a trending or a speed being one of the changes. Like, what are the things that we're seeing coming, or what are we trying to
Sure.
prepare for? I think the EV charging proliferation and impact is one that we're watching. Right. When you think about restaurants, gas stations needing to become more of a destination for a period of time because the way you get energy is changing. I think is changing how these concepts want to deal with them. Like how long do you want to provide guest Wi-Fi on your sites? Do you want to be a coffee shop where you have people parked there for 7 hours, or
That's a big debate.
yeah, right? And is there a reciprocal amount of revenue you're getting out of them if they stick around longer or not? Um,
Hey, it's funny because I did have somebody in the full service or luxury segment actually suggest that people should be paying an upcharge based on the time period they make their reservation and how long they sit at the table.
I mean, your lifeblood is how many times can you turn your tables in that industry, right? So it's that's an interesting balance for sure. And I think that the other one that we see actually coming through both industries is making an easy experience through multiple different channels, right? If you think about and this I'll use this one as a crossover, but we're having conversations about. I mean, everyone is aware of tap to pay at the gas pump as being an option. We're having conversations with several different providers. Well, how do at some point does your car become your tap? Like, why do you need your phone in the middle of that? right? So whether you're thinking about your toll tags or your license plates or even the vehicle manufacturers themselves, like
Exactly.
how does that? And then you start thinking about, okay, well, what
Now you
about
think about the drive-through and you think about all
exactly?
the other
Yeah,
pieces, right?
or the food ordering from the interface that really is become a phone that is the center console of your vehicle. How do you do food delivery to different mobile locations? Like, how do you deal with food delivery providers and drivers? Right. So these are all technologies that I think um, that are on the horizon. But I think the biggest challenge is not knowing what the new trend is going to be in 2 years. So it's very difficult to build a platform.
You may not know what the new trend is going to be. And by the way, it may not be because of the speed of technology. It may be because the influencers on the consumers
Yeah.
and what it is
Oh,
that they're being told they need to do, right? So
100%. In fact,
you don't know where it's coming from.
I'd almost guarantee that we don't know what the trend for 2 or 3 years from now is. So the key is, how do you set up a technology infrastructure that's going to allow you to dynamically change and quickly accommodate whatever that new change is going to be without making a massive investment that makes you bet the bank on something that just might not work or might go away relatively quickly, right?
So, before we wrap up, I'm curious.
Yeah.
So you took the position, you came into a different industry, and I may have asked you a little bit about this at the top, but you know, what was that aha thing or that surprise that you got in making sort of this shift, or the aha thing or surprise, and you said, "Oh my gosh, that's so simple. We really need to bring it," or it's so brilliant that we need to bring this over to the restaurant industry.
Hmm. Um, I'm positive. So I tell you, uh, I think this one's going to almost sound obvious, but I think that people focus very deeply into their vertical without recognizing necessarily how many complementary or crossover opportunities there are. When I think about um, I've spent a lot of time talking about the similarities between um, major fuel companies and restaurants.
I would agree with that, by the way. I would agree that people do not,
Yeah,
focus on those sorts of things and they don't see the opportunities that are right in front of them.
yeah,
And unfortunately, sometimes it takes a COVID or it takes something like that to say, hey, we really can do these things that we didn't, do before.
yeah. So and I think that the biggest thing that I've been hitting home here, and I think that why we're so excited about this space is that at the end of the day, they're the same consumer, right, and the same consumer expectations,
That's true.
and the concepts like it's we're not leading the markets together; they're already going there, right? I mean that's and so I think that that's why I'm really excited about the opportunity. I mean, I came to work here because of that crossover, as well as the incredible people that I get to work with. But this is that the consumer is leading us here, right? This is they're demanding for these experiences to come together as the way we move around our towns and the way we eat is changing.
Well, listen, from the IFBTA perspective, we're very appreciative not only of the support, but also of the depth of knowledge and experience and the sharing that you can do. And I was curious, now that you're on a sort of
Yeah,
a related but a different camp, what's your feeling about, why, PDI supports the IFBTA and makes that investment?
yeah. So I have loved to see how this relationship now is different in a different role because I think that PDI doesn't necessarily we're not one of the top brands that comes to mind when you think about who are technology providers that can help me solve my problems and deliver great digital experiences to my restaurant guests. And so I am very excited about IFBTA's opportunity to help us get that message out as we continue to earn our way into this space. But IFBTA has a massive membership base that many of which I consider friends, and I'm excited to continue to be part of them and have a good avenue to be able to communicate with
And
them
I
and to
think
let
that if
them.
we're able to share that story and keep that conversation going,
Yeah,
at the different IFBTA events and
love it.
bringing industries and technology together, you're going to find that PDI Technologies, while maybe not the best known right now, will be just based on experience and what you bring to the industry. So we're certainly very appreciative of the support and
Yeah,
and happy to have you join us. And I might just add, happy to make sure that Matt Andrews, the Senior Vice President of Site Solutions for PDI Technology, is still a member of the IFBTA.
I'll take it. It's good to talk to you, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you for joining us.